My daughter-in-law told me at her wedding, "The best gift you can give us is to disappear." That same night, I was dining on the private terrace of a five-star resort. I never thought the most humiliating moment of my life would become the first moment of my liberation. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to continue unburdening myself. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent my whole life believing that love is demonstrated through sacrifice. I live in Pasadena, in a craftsman bungalow I inherited from my parents, with a backyard full of red geraniums that I water every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, just as the sun peeks through the bougainvillea climbing the kitchen wall. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee from my old percolator mixes with the sound of birds nesting in the old ash tree in the center of the yard. This morning, like every other for the past 5 years, I woke up at 5:30, my wrinkled hands, spotted with burns from the cast-iron skillet and scars from years of washing clothes by hand, moved automatically, preparing a breakfast no one would come to eat. 3 plates on the worn wooden table, one for me, one for my son Robert, and one for Danielle, his wife. Always 3 plates, even though I've been the only one eating breakfast in this house for months. The hand-knitted cardigan my mother left me hangs on the back of the wicker chair where I sit every afternoon, quilting squares for blankets I give as birthday presents to people who don't invite me to their parties. My fingers, already misshapen by arthritis but still skilled with a needle, trace rose petals onto white fabric while I wait for phone calls that never come and visits that are indefinitely postponed. But this morning was different. Robert's text arrived at 7:15, after I had already washed the single set of dishes I had used and watered the plants in the yard, talking to them as if they were my only confidants. "Mom, we're not going to make it for breakfast. Danny is feeling nauseous." Danielle. Always Danny when he texted me, never my wife or your daughter-in-law, as if using a nickname made the contempt that woman has felt for me since the day I met her 3 years ago any less real. She arrived at my house in stilettos that scraped the hardwood floors and a smile that never reached her eyes. I tucked the phone into the pocket of the embroidered apron I wear every day, the same one I sewed when Robert was 15 and used to help me in the kitchen, peeling potatoes for the Sunday family dinners that are now just memories. My steps echoed on the cool tile floors as I walked to my room, where on the mahogany dresser rests the photo of my wedding to Arthur, taken 40 years ago at All Saints Church, back when I believed family was forever and that children honored their mothers until death. Arthur died 8 years ago of a massive heart attack, one November morning while he was pruning the roses in the garden. I found him collapsed next to the rose bush we planted the day Robert was born, with the clippers still in his hand and an expression of peace he hadn't worn in years. Since then, I've been a widow, a retrospective single mother, and the guardian of a house far too large for a woman who feels smaller every day. Robert is my only son, the baby who arrived after 5 years of marriage and 3 losses I never spoke of. Because in my generation, you carried grief in your chest like you kept jewels at the bottom of a dresser. I raised him with the devotion of a woman who knew she might not get another chance to be a mother. I taught him to walk in this same yard where my footsteps now echo alone, and I worked myself to the bone to give him the college education at UCLA that I never had. He studied business administration. She, Danielle Harrison, is a psychologist from a wealthy family in Beverly Hills. Ever since they met in a coffee shop in Silver Lake, my son began to transform into a stranger who spoke to me with the condescending patience one uses with a bothersome old person. The transformation was gradual but relentless. First, he stopped coming over on Sundays. Then the calls became more spaced out. Then came the suggestions that my house was too big for me alone, that I should consider selling, that Danielle knew of some very nice condos for people my age in a more suitable area. They never said nursing home, but the words hung in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. But I resisted. This house has my family's soul soaked into every wooden beam. Robert was born here. Arthur died here. I have cried and laughed here for 40 years. The walls hold the echoes of lullabies, marital spats, first words, and last conversations. It's not just property. It's the physical archive of my existence. Danielle never understood that. To her, the house was an underutilized real estate asset, held onto by a sentimental old woman clinging to the past. Her calculating eyes would scan the rooms as if she were already measuring spaces for a remodel, taking inventory of what would stay and what would be thrown out when I was no longer around to defend it. "Helen," she would say with that cold, practiced smile, "you know Robert and I want what's best for you. This house is a lot of responsibility. Wouldn't you like somewhere more comfortable? More modern? We could help you with the expenses." Help me. As if the 40 years I'd spent paying for this house on a seamstress's salary, as if the sacrifices I made so Robert could go to college, as if the nights I stayed up when he had a fever were worth nothing compared to her generous offer of help. That morning, after Robert's text, I sat in the rocking chair on the porch where Arthur used to read me the news from the paper while I quilted. The silence was different. It wasn't the absence of noise, but the presence of abandonment. My geraniums bloomed, indifferent to my loneliness. The bougainvillea continued to climb toward the sky, unconcerned that there was no one left to admire them with me. I took my cardigan and went for a walk along the tree-lined streets of Pasadena, greeting the neighbors who still knew me, buying vegetables at the farmer's market where Mr. Chen would ask after Robert as if he didn't already know I hadn't seen him in months. I feigned normalcy while inside. Something was slowly crumbling, like one of those old houses that sags bit by bit until one day there's nothing left standing. When I got home, the phone was ringing. "Robert." "Mom, I have to tell you something important." "Mom, I have to tell you something important." Robert's voice sounded different, like when he was a boy and had broken something valuable and didn't know how to confess. I sat down in the wicker chair, clutching the phone with hands that began to tremble for no apparent reason. "Tell me, honey. Danielle's pregnant." The words floated in the yard's still air like dandelion seeds on the wind. A grandchild. My first grandchild. My heart leaped, and an involuntary smile spread across my wrinkled lips. "Oh, Robert, that's wonderful. How far along is she? How is she feeling? Do you need anything? I can start knitting a blanket. I have some very soft yellow yarn that—" "Mom, wait." His tone stopped me cold. "We haven't told anyone yet. Danielle wants it to be a surprise until the 5th month." "But I'm your mother, Robert. I'm that baby's grandmother." "I know, but you know how Danny is with these things. She's a perfectionist. She wants to do everything step by step. A perfectionist." The word he used to justify every slight, every exclusion, every time his wife treated me like a piece of old furniture cluttering up her new life. I swallowed hard and tried to sound understanding. "All right, honey. Whatever you two say. But if you need anything at all." "Yeah, Mom. I'll talk to you later." And he hung up. Just like that. Without asking how I was, if I'd eaten, if I needed anything from the store. That's how he'd started ending conversations since he got married. In a hurry, like someone eager to finish an uncomfortable task. I remained seated on the porch, looking at the bougainvillea Arthur had planted when we bought the house. A grandchild. The word spun in my head like a catchy song. I imagined tiny hands gripping my fingers, curious little eyes discovering the geraniums, giggles once again filling the silent corners of my home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up 3 times to check on what had been Robert's room, thinking about how we could fix it up for when the baby came to visit. I took a box from the closet where I kept the clothes I had knitted for Robert when he was little. White booties, tiny yarn caps, little sweaters that smelled of mothballs and memories. For the next few weeks, my life revolved around this secret news that I carried like a treasure. At the farmer's market, when Mrs. Gable asked if I had any news from Robert, I would smile mysteriously and change the subject. I began to save every penny from my Social Security check to buy the baby something beautiful when it was born. Every time I passed the children's clothing stores on Colorado Boulevard, I'd stop to look at the displays. There was a gorgeous navy blue stroller in the Baby Blossom boutique that cost 3 months of my income, but I could picture myself pushing it along the sidewalks of Pasadena, taking my grandchild for a walk on Sunday afternoons. I went to All Saints Church, where Arthur and I were married and where Robert was baptized, and I lit a candle for the pregnancy. I whispered my gratitude through tears of joy. promising that I would be the best grandmother in the world, that I would teach the baby how to say their prayers, how to bake biscuits from scratch, how to care for the plants just as my mother had taught me. But the days passed, and Robert didn't call again. When I called his cell, he'd answer with monosyllables, always in a rush, always with Danielle yelling something in the background that I couldn't quite make out. "How is Danielle, honey? Has she had morning sickness?" "She's fine, Mom." "Has she been to the doctor? Does she need me to go with her?" "No, we already went. Everything's fine. Can I come see her? I could make her some chicken soup. It's good for pregnant women." "Better not, she's really tired." Always the same, always the distance, always the feeling that my happiness about the pregnancy was an inconvenience to them. One Tuesday afternoon, while watering the geraniums, I saw my neighbor Hope peek over the fence that separates our yards. Hope is 70, a widow like me, and for 20 years we've been sharing our sorrows over that fence. "Helen, did you hear?" "Hear what, Hope?" "I saw your daughter-in-law at the Nordstrom Cafe. She is very pregnant, dear. You can really see the bump." My heart sank. Danielle, pregnant, walking around Pasadena, and I didn't know. They hadn't told me. They hadn't included me. "Are you sure it was her, Hope?" "Oh, absolutely. She was with a very elegant woman, buying baby clothes in the maternity section. They looked so happy. A very elegant woman, Danielle's mother, the other grandmother, the one who had been told, the one who was taken on shopping trips, the one who was included in the joy of the pregnancy. That night, I cried in the kitchen while I heated up some canned soup for my lonely dinner. I cried with rage, sadness, and humiliation. Why was Danielle's mother allowed to know and not me? Why was she taken shopping while I wasn't even allowed to see my pregnant daughter-in-law? The next day, I called Robert. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. On the third try, Danielle answered. "Hello." "Hi, Danielle. It's Helen. Is Robert there?" "He's busy." Her voice was cold as always, but there was something else. Something that made me feel small. "I just wanted to ask, well, I heard that you're pregnant. Congratulations." Silence. A long silence that felt like a slap in the face. "How did you find out?" Someone at the market told me. "Danielle, I'm the grandmother. Why didn't you—" "Helen, listen to me very carefully." Her voice grew harder. "Robert and I decide how and when we share our news. If someone else found out, that's not our problem. But I'm his mother, Danielle, and I'm going to be that baby's grandmother. You're going to be whatever we decide you're going to be." And she hung up on me. I stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone as if it were the sound of my heart breaking. "You're going to be whatever we decide you're going to be." Those words stabbed me in the chest like thorns. That afternoon, sitting in the rocking chair where Arthur used to read me the paper, I began to wonder when it all started. When had my son stopped loving me? When had he allowed his wife to treat me like an obstacle? At what point had I become invisible in the life of the person I loved most in this world? I remembered their wedding day, 2 years ago. A small ceremony in a venue in Beverly Hills. Elegant but cold. I arrived in a navy blue dress I had bought with my savings, excited to see my son happy. But from the moment I stepped inside, I felt out of place. Danielle's family occupied the front rows. Aunts, cousins, grandparents, all dressed in expensive clothes with perfect smiles. I sat in the very back, alone, because Robert had told me there wasn't much room to invite my few friends from the neighborhood. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, for a split second I thought about raising my hand. Not because I was against Robert being happy, but because I sensed that this woman was going to take him away from me forever. But I stayed silent. As always. At the reception, I was seated at a remote table. No one asked me to dance. No one asked how I felt. Danielle ignored me completely, and Robert was so busy with his important guests that he barely spoke 2 words to me. When they went on their honeymoon to Hawaii, I waited for photos, calls, any sign that they were thinking of me. Nothing. They came back 3 weeks later and took another 5 days to visit. And now this. A pregnancy I learned about through neighborhood gossip. A joy from which I had been excluded from the very beginning. That night, while I was making my chamomile tea before bed, the phone rang. It was Robert. "Mom, we need to talk." "Mom? We need to talk." Robert's words echoed in the kitchen like a funeral bell. It was Friday night, and I had spent the entire week waiting for that call, dreading that call, knowing that after my conversation with Danielle, something had changed forever. "Tell me, honey. We're coming to the house tomorrow afternoon. Both of us. Both of them. Danielle and him. A united front. A tribunal coming to pass sentence on me. No more I'm coming over. No more I'll visit you. Now it was us against her, them against me. Is something wrong, Robert? We need to clear some things up." His voice sounded different, colder, as if he had rehearsed the words in front of a mirror until they were stripped of any affection. It was the tone he used at his job, professional and distant. This was no longer my son talking to me. It was a stranger performing an unpleasant duty. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the kitchen until 5 in the morning, cleaning already clean dishes, arranging the embroidered napkins no one used, polishing the wooden table until it shone. I needed everything to be perfect when they arrived, as if the cleanliness of my house could also clean up the mess my relationship with my son had become. I started preparing a beef brisket early, the way Robert liked it as a child. I ground the spices for the rub in the old stone mortar and pestle that had belonged to my grandmother, with the patience that only hands that have cooked with love for decades can possess. The aroma filled the entire house, mingling with the smell of the buttermilk biscuits I made from scratch, one by one, just as my mother had taught me. I set the table with the wedding china I saved for special occasions, the set I had bought piece by piece during my first years of marriage, saving from the grocery money. 3 plates, as always. 3 crystal glasses that sparkled in the afternoon light filtering through the dining room windows. At 4 o'clock sharp, I heard a car pull up outside. My heart began to pound so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I smoothed down the navy blue dress I wore, the same one I wore to church on Sundays, and went to open the door with a smile I hoped didn't look as forced as it felt. Robert looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes and had lost weight. His beard was poorly trimmed and his shirt was wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept well in days. But Danielle looked radiant. Her pregnancy had given her a special glow. Her skin looked like porcelain, and her brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. She wore a beige maternity outfit that fit her impeccably, and she carried a leather handbag that cost more than 3 of my Social Security checks. "Hi, Mom." Robert gave me a quick, evasive kiss on the cheek, as if my skin would burn him. Danielle greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and walked straight into the dining room without waiting for an invitation, as if she owned the place. She sat in the chair that had been Arthur's for 40 years, the one with the back worn smooth by his shoulders, and placed her hands on her belly in a gesture that seemed calculated to remind me of what I didn't have, access to my grandchild. "Smells good, Mom," Robert said, but his voice was automatic, lacking the genuine joy with which he used to praise my cooking. "It's brisket, just how you like it, and fresh biscuits." Danielle looked at the plate I served her with an expression of disgust, as if it were poison instead of food prepared with love. "Thank you, Helen, but I can't eat anything too rich. The doctor says it's bad for the baby." The doctor. Always the doctor. As if I hadn't raised a healthy son on the food I had cooked my whole life. As if generations of women in my family had survived without advice from expensive Beverly Hills doctors. "I can make you something simpler, dear. Some soup and biscuits." "Don't worry," Robert interrupted. "Danny already ate before we came. She already ate before she came. To my house, where I had been cooking since 7 in the morning to welcome them, where I had set the table with my best dishes and prepared the meal he had loved since he was a boy. She already ate before she came, as if my food were an annoying chore to be avoided. I sat in my place, across from them, and tried to smile as I ate the brisket alone, which tasted like ash. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Robert poked at the food on his plate, pushing the brisket from one side to the other without taking a bite. Danielle checked her phone with the shamelessness of someone who doesn't consider their rudeness. "Well," I said finally, because someone had to break the tension, "tell me about the baby. Do you know if it's a boy or a girl?" Robert and Danielle exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. It was as if they had rehearsed it, as if it were part of a plan. "It's a girl," Danielle said at last, stroking her belly with that Madonna-like smile pregnant women practice in the mirror. "A girl!" My heart leaped with joy. How wonderful! Do you have a name picked out? Sophia, Robert answered. After Danny's grandmother. After Danny's grandmother. Not after my mother, whose name was Hope. Not after my grandmother, whose name was Rose. After Danny's grandmother, a woman I had met only once at the wedding and who had shaken my hand with just her fingertips, as if I were contagious. What a beautiful name, I managed to say, though the words caught in my throat. Helen? Danielle set her phone on the table and looked me directly in the eye for the first time in 2 years. We need to talk about some important things. Her tone was that of an executive addressing a problem employee. Cold, calculating, with the authority that money and education provide when used as weapons against those who have neither. Robert and I have been thinking a lot about the future, about what's best for our family. Our family. Not the family. Our family, which clearly did not include me. Of course, dear. Whatever you need. You see, with the baby comes a lot of new responsibilities. We're going to need space, peace, and privacy to adjust to being parents. Robert stared at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. I knew what was coming. I felt it in every fiber of my being, but I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died, was going to do this to me. We understand that you want to be present in the girl's life, Danielle continued, but we think it's best to establish clear boundaries from the beginning. Boundaries. The word pierced my chest like a dagger. Boundaries for seeing my granddaughter. Boundaries for loving my son's daughter. What kind of boundaries? Well, for example, visits, Robert finally said, his voice barely a whisper. We think it's better to coordinate them beforehand, so you don't just show up unannounced. Show up unannounced, as if I had ever in my entire life shown up at my son's house unannounced. As if I weren't the one who always waited for his calls, his visits, his crumbs of attention. Of course, honey. I always call before I come over. And also, Danielle added, we think it's important that you respect our decisions as parents. That we don't interfere with her upbringing with outdated ideas. Outdated ideas. As if the love with which I had raised Robert was obsolete. As if the values I had instilled in him were poison for his daughter. I would never interfere. Helen, Danielle interrupted me with a smile made of pure ice. I know you have good intentions, but Robert and I have a very different way of seeing things than you do. We want to raise Sophia with modern methods, with a more open mindset. More open. As if I were a closed-minded, ignorant old woman, incapable of offering anything of value to my granddaughter. Besides, she continued, my mother is going to be very involved in her upbringing. She has experience with children, she studied child development, and she lives very close to us. Her help will be more practical. Her mother, the other grandmother, the useful, modern, practical grandmother, the one who lived in Beverly Hills and had a college degree and knew about child development, not like me, who only knew how to love without limits and give her life for her children. I have experience too, dear. I raised Robert and he turned out fine. Mom, Robert interrupted, and for the first time all afternoon he looked me in the eyes. We need you to understand that things are going to change. It's not just you and me anymore. We're a family now, and we have to do what's best for us. A family. The three of them were a family, and what was I? An intruder, a burden, an inconvenient reminder of less sophisticated times. The silence that followed was deafening. Danielle went back to her phone. Robert got up and began to pace the dining room like a caged lion, and I just sat there, at my own table, feeling everything that had been my world shatter into pieces. Anything else? I asked, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. Actually, yes, Mom. One more thing. Robert stopped behind Danielle's chair and put his hands on her shoulders, as if protecting her from me. We're planning on moving. To a bigger house, more suitable for the baby. My breath caught in my throat. Are you leaving the city? No, but away from the city center. Farther north, where there are better schools, a better environment. A better environment. Away from Pasadena. Away from me. Away from everything we had built together over 32 years. And when? In a couple of months. Before Sophia is born. Sophia. My granddaughter would be born far away from me, would grow up without knowing me, without knowing that a grandmother existed who had loved her before she was even born, who had prayed for her every night, who had knitted blankets to keep her warm. I got up from the table on shaky legs and began to clear the plates that no one had touched. The brisket had gone cold, a greasy film forming on top. The biscuits were hard. All my love turned to waste. "Helen," Danielle's voice called from the dining room, "we hope you understand. We hope you understand." As if it were that simple. As if I could understand that the son for whom I had given my life was erasing me from his future as easily as one erases a pencil mark. I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I would either scream or cry or beg, and I didn't want to give them that satisfaction. I heard them leave from the kitchen, footsteps fading away, a door closing, an engine starting, and then, in the silence of my empty house, I finally allowed myself to cry. 3 weeks after that conversation, Robert hadn't called. Not once. His silence had become deafening, filling every corner of my house with an absence that was heavier than any presence. I called his cell phone every day. First day, "The number you have dialed is not available." Second day, the same. Third day, Danielle answered. "Hello? Hi, Danielle. Is Robert there? He's working. Could you please have him call me? I want to know how you're doing with the pregnancy, dear." A long sigh, as if my concern were the most annoying thing in the world. "Helen, we already told you we need space. Robert is very stressed with work, and I'm stressed with the nausea. It's not a good time for visits or calls. I'm not asking for a visit. I just want to know if you're okay. If you need anything." "We don't need anything." And she hung up. Again. The next day, I went to their apartment in Santa Monica. It was a modern building of glass and concrete, with a uniformed doorman who looked at me suspiciously when I said I was there to see Robert Miller. "Is Mrs. Miller expecting you?" "I'm his mother." The doorman made a call. He spoke in a low voice, nodded several times, and then looked at me with that pitiful expression people use when they have to deliver bad news. "Ma'am, she says it's not a good time. She said it's better to call and make an appointment." An appointment. To see my own son, I needed an appointment, as if he were a doctor or a dentist. I stood on the sidewalk on Ocean Avenue, looking up at the 5th-floor windows where they lived, hoping Robert might look out, might come down, might remember that I existed. Nothing happened. I took the bus back to Pasadena, squeezed between students and office workers, carrying a bag of pears I had bought for Danielle because I remembered that when I was pregnant with Robert, I craved sweet fruit. The pears got bruised during the trip, and when I got home they were soft and brown, like they had been beaten. The house greeted me with its usual silence. I sat in the kitchen and ate the bruised pears, one by one, as tears fell onto my wrinkled hands. Every bite tasted of humiliation. That night, my friend Hope called from next door. "Helen, are you okay? I thought I heard you crying." "I'm fine, Hope. Are you sure? Do you want me to come over?" "No, thank you. We'll talk tomorrow." But we didn't talk the next day, because the next day I discovered something that broke my soul into even smaller pieces. I was at the Pasadena Farmers Market, buying tomatoes from Mr. Chen's stall, when I saw Danielle's mother. Imogene Harrison, that was her name. She was pushing an empty baby stroller, but it was new, gleaming, navy blue with gold accents. The exact same one I had seen at the Baby Blossom Boutique and had been saving up to buy. "Mrs. Harrison," I greeted her, approaching with a smile I hoped didn't look as desperate as it felt. She looked at me with surprise, as if it were odd to run into me at the market in my own neighborhood. "Oh, Helen. Hello. What a beautiful stroller. Is it for Sophia?" Her face lit up in a way that caused me physical pain. "Yes. Isn't it gorgeous? I just bought it yesterday. Danielle and I spent the whole afternoon at Baby Emporium picking things out for her. It was wonderful. Danielle and her. The whole afternoon. Picking out things for my granddaughter. For the baby whose name I wasn't even allowed to mention without permission. It's lovely," I managed to say. "Have you seen the ultrasound pictures? She looks identical to Danielle as a baby. She has the same little button nose and everything." Ultrasound pictures. There were ultrasound pictures I hadn't seen. there was a face, features, family resemblances that were unknown to me because no one had included me in that joy. No, I haven't seen any pictures. Imogene gave me a strange look, as if she had just realized something awkward. Oh, well, I'm sure Robert will show them to you soon. I'm sure. As if it were normal for the paternal grandmother not to have seen the first photos of her own granddaughter. As if it were logical for me to be the last to know anything about the baby I had been awaiting with more excitement than anyone. How many months is she now? 6. The baby shower is next week. It's going to be beautiful. We're hosting it in the garden of my house in Beverly Hills. All my friends are coming. Danielle's cousins. A baby shower. They were having a party to celebrate my granddaughter, and I didn't even know about it. Another celebration from which I was excluded. Another joy that had been stolen from me. How nice. Well, Helen, I have to run. I'm going to buy flowers for the decorations. She walked away, pushing the empty stroller, leaving me standing between stalls of vegetables with a hollowness in my chest that I didn't know how to fill. I went home and immediately called Robert. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. On the third try, he picked up. Hello? Robert, it's your mother. Oh, hi, Mom. His voice was tired, as if talking to me were a chore. Honey, I ran into Mrs. Harrison at the market. She told me you're having a baby shower. Silence. Robert, are you there? Yeah, Mom. I'm here. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to help. I wanted to be a part of it. Mom, look. It's just going to be a small thing. Just family. Just family. I wasn't family. The paternal grandmother was not family. But Robert, I am your mother. I am that little girl's grandmother. I know that, Mom. But, look, Danny just wanted something intimate. With her family and her close friends. And what am I? The question escaped on its own, loaded with all the pain I had been swallowing for weeks. Well, you're my mom, but I'm nothing to your wife. That's not it, Mom. Then what is it, Robert? Explain it to me. Because I haven't heard from you in weeks. I can't see you. I don't know how the pregnancy is going. I find everything out by accident, as if I'm a complete stranger. Mom, don't be dramatic. Things are just different now. Different. The word he used to justify everything unjustifiable. Different how, honey? At what point did I stop mattering? You haven't stopped mattering, but... Look, Mom, Danny is very sensitive right now. The doctor says she needs to be calm to avoid stress. And I cause her stress? Silence again. A silence that answered my question better than any words could. Robert. Mom, I'll talk to you later, okay? I'm at work. Robert, don't hang up on me, please. I'll call you later. And he hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen that had gone black. Just like my world. My son had just confirmed what I already knew. I caused his wife stress. My existence was a problem to be managed, an annoyance to be minimized. That afternoon I sat on my porch and cried among my geraniums. I cried until I had no tears left, until my chest ached from sobbing. The plants watched me in silence, mute witnesses to my collapse. Hope peeked over the fence. Helen, what is it? Nothing, Hope. Nothing that can be fixed. Do you want me to come over? No, thank you. I need to be alone. But being alone was exactly what was killing me. Loneliness had become a physical presence in my house. Something dense and sticky that clung to my skin and wouldn't let me breathe. That night, as I heated up a can of soup for dinner, the phone rang. For a second, my heart leaped, thinking it was Robert calling to apologize, to invite me to the baby shower, to tell me it was all a misunderstanding. It was a recording. Dear Mrs. Miller, this is a reminder that your monthly credit card payment is due tomorrow. I hung up without listening to the rest. Even the machines had more consideration for me than my own son. The next day, I went to the bank to pay the card. It was the money I had been saving to buy something nice for Sophia, but there was no point in keeping it anymore. The way things were going, I was never going to meet my granddaughter. In line at the bank, I overheard two women talking about their grandchildren. My Carla brings me new pictures every week. Yesterday, she showed me the latest ultrasound. The baby looks so precious. You're so lucky. I watch my grandkids every Tuesday and Thursday. They're the light of my life. I stepped out of the line. I couldn't bear to hear about happy grandmothers, about grandchildren they knew and cared for, about families that worked the way they were supposed to. I walked aimlessly through the streets of Pasadena, past the baby boutiques that once filled me with excitement and now only reminded me of what I had lost. In the window of the Baby Blossom boutique, the navy blue stroller was gone. Someone else had bought it. Someone who actually had the right to buy it for their grandchild. When I got home, there was an envelope under my door. It was an invitation. Elegant pink cardstock with gold lettering. Imogene Harrison requests the pleasure of your company at the baby shower of her daughter Danielle Harrison Miller in celebration of the upcoming arrival of her granddaughter Sophia. My name was nowhere on it. It was a generic invitation, the kind you give out as a courtesy when you have extras. As if to say, here, so you can't say we didn't invite you. On the back, a handwritten note in Danielle's script. Helen, Robert asked me to invite you. The party is this Saturday at 3 p.m. in Beverly Hills. Please RSVP. P.S. It's a women-only event. RSVP. As if I were just any other guest. As if I weren't the grandmother of the child they were celebrating. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake wondering if I should go to the baby shower, if I had the strength to endure another humiliation, if it was worth exposing myself once more to the contempt of Danielle and her elegant friends. But it was my granddaughter. It was the only chance I had to be present at her celebration, even as a second-class guest. I decided to go, and that decision would change everything. On Saturday, I arrived in Beverly Hills 2 hours early. I had taken 3 buses from Pasadena, carrying a gift bag that held the baby blanket I had been secretly knitting during my sleepless nights. Every stitch was a prayer, every row a hope that things would get better between us. The Harrison house was a 2-story white mansion in a gated community. Perfectly manicured lawns, a fountain in the center, BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes parked in the circular driveway like a luxury car show. I arrived by taxi, in my polyester blue dress that I had washed 3 times to make it look decent, and low-heeled shoes I'd bought at a flea market. I rang the bell at 3 o'clock sharp. A uniformed maid opened the door with a professional smile. Are you here for Miss Danielle's baby shower? Yes, I'm Helen Miller. The young woman checked a list on a clipboard, frowned, then checked again. I don't see you on the list, ma'am. My heart dropped to my feet. After everything, after the invitation, after RSVPing via text, I wasn't on the list. It must be a mistake. I'm Danielle's mother-in-law. Oh, let me go ask. She disappeared, leaving me standing on the doorstep, holding my modest gift while I heard laughter and music coming from the garden. 5 minutes later, she returned with Imogene. Helen, so glad you could make it. Her hug was theatrical, the kind you give when people are watching. Come in, come in. How thoughtful of you to bring a gift. She led me toward the backyard, where at least 40 elegantly dressed women were holding glasses of pink champagne and chatting in closed circles. Pink and gold balloons hung from the trees. Long tables covered with lace cloths displayed towers of petite four and floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Danielle was sitting on a kind of throne decorated with white tulle, surrounded by gifts wrapped in fine paper with giant bows. She wore an ivory-colored maternity dress that made her look like a pregnant princess, and she had a crown of fresh flowers in her hair. She looked radiant, happy, surrounded by love and attention. When she saw me arrive, her smile froze for a fraction of a second before she regained her composure. Helen, you came. Her tone suggested surprise, as if my presence were unexpected despite the invitation. Of course, dear, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I handed her my gift. It was a simple paper bag decorated with a small bow I had made myself. Next to the enormous boxes wrapped in imported paper and silk ribbons, my gift looked pathetic. How nice. Thank you. She placed it to the side, with a few other small gifts that were obviously from acquaintances. The important gifts, the ones that really mattered, were piled in the center. A luxury stroller, a carved wooden crib, a video baby monitor, clothes from European brands. Come, let me introduce you to the girls, Imogene said, taking my arm. The girls were women my age or younger, all dressed in expensive clothes and perfect makeup. Doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, executives' wives. Each one greeted me with icy politeness before immediately turning back to their previous conversations, as if I were invisible. I stood by the dessert table, not knowing what to do with myself. All the tables had assigned seating with elegant place cards written in gold calligraphy. I looked for my name. I couldn't find it at any table. "Excuse me," I said to the maid serving drinks. "Do you know where I'm supposed to sit?" "Oh, ma'am, let me ask." She disappeared and came back with a folding chair. "Mrs. Harrison said to put you here," she said, pointing to a space next to the gift table, away from all the other tables, as if I were part of the decorations. A folding chair, at a party where everyone else sat on elegant garden chairs with matching cushions. A folding chair placed where I couldn't talk to anyone, where I would be alone but visible to all. I sat down, feeling like a sad ornament at a party that wasn't for me. The party started with games I didn't understand. Baby-themed riddles, contests where you had to taste baby food and guess the flavor. Diaper-changing races on dolls. Everyone laughed and cheered, genuinely enjoying themselves while I watched from my corner, holding a glass of sparkling water I had poured for myself because no one offered me champagne. Then came the gifts. Danielle opened each one with genuine exclamations of joy, showing them off to the crowd like trophies. The luxury stroller drew applause. The video monitor generated audible envy. The designer clothes provoked sighs of admiration. By the time she got to my gift, I had been sitting for 2 hours watching her receive wonders I could never afford. She opened the paper bag with a forced smile. "Oh, how lovely," she said, holding up the blanket I had knitted with so much love. It was white with a pink cross-stitch border, soft as a cloud, made with the finest wool I could buy. Every stitch had been an anticipated caress for my granddaughter. Every row a lullaby woven with my own hands. But next to all the expensive gifts, it looked like what it was. Homemade, modest, made by a poor grandmother who had no money. Only love. "Did you knit that yourself?" one of the guests asked in a condescending tone. "Yes," I answered with a pride that immediately deflated. "How quaint," another commented. "Like old-fashioned grandmas." Old-fashioned grandmas. As if I were a relic, a survivor from a less sophisticated time when people made things by hand because they couldn't afford to buy them. Danielle quickly folded the blanket and put it with the lesser gifts, the ones that would obviously end up in a forgotten drawer. "Thank you, Helen. It's very sweet." Sweet. Not beautiful, not special, not unique. Sweet. The way you describe the failed attempts of small children. The climax arrived when Imogene called for silence for a toast. "I want to thank all of you for joining us on this very special day," she said, raising her champagne flute. "Danielle, my love, you are going to be a wonderful mother, and Sophia will be so lucky to grow up surrounded by so much love." Everyone raised their glasses. I raised my glass of water. "To Sophia, who will have the best grandmothers in the world," Imogene continued, looking directly at an elegant woman I didn't know. "Her grandmother Imogene, who will spoil her, and her grandmother Carmen." She gestured to the stranger, who came all the way from Spain just to meet her. Grandmother Carmen? Who was Grandmother Carmen? "Carmen is Danielle's godmother," someone explained. "She practically raised her. She's like a second mother, 2 official grandmothers. The biological one and the adopted one. Both acknowledged, celebrated, included in the toast. And me, the actual paternal grandmother, invisible in my folding chair. "Cheers!" they all shouted. "Cheers!" I moved my lips without making a sound, pretending to participate in a celebration from which I had been systematically excluded. After the toast, people broke into small groups to chat. I tried to approach a few conversations, but it was as if I had a contagious disease. The women would subtly move away, close their circles, turn their backs on me without even realizing it. I took refuge in the guest bathroom, a luxurious space with gold wallpaper and embroidered towels. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw what they saw: a 62-year-old woman in a cheap dress, worn-out shoes, and a homemade hairdo. An intruder in a world where I didn't belong. When I came out, I heard voices from the hallway. Danielle and her mother were talking in low tones near the staircase. "I don't understand why you had to invite her," Imogene was saying. "Robert insisted. He said if I didn't, His mom would just make a scene. Poor thing, she looks so out of place. I know. But what can you do? At least we did our duty. We did our duty. Inviting me had been a formality, an unpleasant obligation they had endured to keep Robert happy. I hid behind a pillar, feeling what was left of my heart crack. Have you decided about the hospital? Imogene asked. Yes, we're doing a private birth at Cedars-Sinai, and only you will be in the room when she's born. Robert agrees. And his mother? Robert is going to explain to her that for medical reasons they don't allow many visitors, that it's better if she waits until we're home. Better if she waits. The birth of my granddaughter, the most important moment, and I would have to wait until they decided I was worthy of meeting her. I returned to the garden on shaky legs. The party continued, no one having noticed my absence. Danielle laughed with her friends, Imogene posed for photos with the official grandmothers, and I remained a ghost in a folding chair. At 5:30, when I couldn't take another minute of humiliation, I went to say goodbye. Danielle, dear, I'm leaving. The party was beautiful. Oh, thanks for coming, Helen. And thank you for the blanket. Her hug was quick, mechanical, the kind you give a distant acquaintance. Anything you need for when the baby arrives? Yes, of course. Robert will be in touch. Robert will be in touch. Not, we'll call you. Not, see you soon. Robert will be in touch, like an intermediary between his wife and the woman who gave birth to him. I left that house carrying my empty bag, having not eaten a single bite because no one offered me food, having not had a real conversation with anyone, having not been included in a single one of the photos taken during the 3 hours of my torture. In the taxi back to Pasadena, as I watched the elegant neighborhoods gradually turn into my humble one, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done begging for love. I was done pleading for attention. I would no longer allow them to treat me like an obstacle in my own son's life. If they wanted to erase me, fine. But they were about to discover that erasing Helen Miller had consequences they had not anticipated. The first step would be to cancel the biggest gift I had ever given them, one they didn't even know they had: my inheritance. On Monday morning, I went straight to the office of Mr. Stevens, the attorney who had handled the papers for my house since Arthur and I bought it 40 years ago. His office was in a historic building in Old Pasadena, with high ceilings and tile floors that creaked under my feet as I walked down a hallway that smelled of old paper and important decisions. Mr. Stevens was 75, with a perfectly trimmed white mustache and the patience of someone who had seen every possible family tragedy over a 5-decade legal career. He received me in his office, which was lined with law books, from behind a mahogany desk that had belonged to his father. Helen, how have you been? It's been a long time. I'm well, Mr. Stevens, though I'm not really here for a social visit. I sat across from him with the straight posture my mother had taught me for important occasions, my hands folded in my lap, my chin held high. I was no longer the broken woman who had left the baby shower 2 days earlier. Something had changed in those 48 hours of quiet reflection. I want to change my will. Mr. Stevens's white eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. He had drafted my original will 12 years ago, when Robert was 20, and I believed a mother's love was automatically returned with a son's gratitude. Any specific problem, Helen? My son and his wife have decided they can live perfectly well without me. I think it's only fair that his inheritance can also exist perfectly well without them. Mr. Stevens leaned back in his leather chair, studying me with the lawyer's gaze that had learned to read between the lines of what people didn't dare say out loud. Are you sure about this? Testamentary changes made in moments of anger can sometimes— I'm not angry, Mr. Stevens. I'm lucid for the first time in years. I told him everything. The secret pregnancy, the systematic humiliations, the baby shower where I was treated like old furniture, the plans to move away without including me, the certainty that they would never truly let me know my granddaughter. Mr. Stevens listened without interrupting, making occasional notes in a leather-bound book. I understand your situation, Helen. What specific changes do you want to make? I want to remove Robert as the primary heir to the house. And I want to remove Danielle from everything completely. My house in Pasadena was easily worth over $1 million. In the heart of one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city, with its historic charm, its spacious rooms, and its prime location. It represented a lifetime of work and sacrifice. Who do you want to leave the house to, then? I had thought about this for hours, walking through my yard among the geraniums Arthur had planted, searching for an answer that wasn't just revenge, but justice. To my dear friend, Hope. Her house is falling apart and her children live out of state. She has looked after me more in these last few years than my own son has. Hope, my 70-year-old neighbor, had been my confidant, my shoulder to cry on, my company on lonely afternoons. When I got the flu last year, she was the one who brought me chicken soup. When my stove broke, she was the one who let me use her kitchen until mine was fixed. She was more family to me than Robert. And your savings? The bank accounts? To her as well. It's about $20,000 I've managed to save from my Social Security checks. Robert always said he didn't need it, that he earned a good living. Well, now he's never going to need it. Mr. Stevens wrote down every word meticulously, his pen gliding over the legal paper with the precision of decades of experience. Anything else? Yes, I want to leave a letter for Robert, a letter to be opened when I die, explaining exactly why I made this decision. Helen, have you considered speaking with him first? Sometimes family misunderstandings? Mr. Stevens, I raised that boy alone for 28 years. I gave him everything I had, and much that I didn't. If, after all that, he can allow his wife to treat me like garbage, then there is no misunderstanding to clear up. There is only a reality to accept. The attorney finished writing and looked at me over his reading glasses. When would you like this to be ready? As soon as possible. This week, if you can. Give me 3 days. Are you going to say anything to Robert? Nothing. Let him find out when it's too late to pretend he loves me. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time in years, I had made a decision that was for me. One that punished ingratitude and set boundaries for those who thought they could walk all over me indefinitely. That afternoon, while I was watering my plants, the phone rang. It was Robert. Hi, Mom. Hello, honey. My voice sounded different, calmer, as if I had found a piece I didn't know I had lost. How are you? I'm very well. And you too? Good, good. Hey, Mom. Danielle told me you went to the baby shower. Yes, I did. Did you like it? Did you have a good time? The question would have hurt me before, back when I still had hope that he actually cared about me. Now, it only confirmed how disconnected he was from my reality. It was very educational. Educational? Yes, honey. I learned a lot of important things. There was a pause. Robert was probably expecting complaints, reproaches, the drama he had always used to justify distancing himself from me. Well, Mom, I'm calling to let you know that Danielle is in her 8th month. The doctor says the baby could come any time now. That's nice, honey. When the baby's born, we'll let you know. But you know it'll be difficult to have visitors at first. The first few days are very delicate. Of course. You let me know whenever you feel it's a good time. My tranquility baffled him. He was prepared for a pleading, desperate Helen, begging to see her granddaughter. Not for this serene version who accepted his terms without a fight. Are you sure you're okay, Mom? You sound different. I've never been better, Robert. Don't worry. Okay. Well, I'll let you go. I'll call you if anything comes up. Yes, if anything comes up. I hung up and stared at the phone. I'll call you if anything comes up, he had said, as if speaking to me were an inconvenience he would only undertake in an emergency. On Thursday, I returned to Mr. Stevens's office. The new will was ready, printed on official bond paper, with all the seals and signatures that made it legal and irreversible. Do you want to review it before you sign? I read every line, every clause, every word that transferred my life's estate from the ungrateful hands of my son to the grateful hands of the only person who had truly treated me like family in recent years. It's perfect. I signed with the gold-nibbed fountain pen Mr. Stevens reserved for important documents. Every letter was a declaration of independence, every stroke a reclamation of my dignity. The letter? He handed me a sealed envelope containing 5 pages where I had poured out 40 years of unrequited love, ignored sacrifices, and tolerated humiliations. The letter Robert would read when it was too late for regrets. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Helen, I hope you don't regret this. Mr. Stevens, you regret the things you do wrong. This is the first thing I've done right in a long time. That evening, I called Hope. Hope, my dear, can you come over for a minute? I have something important to tell you. Hope arrived in 5 minutes, her hair in rollers, wearing the housecoat she kept for nightly emergencies. What happened, Helen? Is everything all right? Sit down, Hope. I have something to tell you. I told her everything. The humiliating baby shower, the decision to change the will, the new reality where she, not Robert, would inherit my house and my savings. Hope was silent for a long time, looking at me as if I had just told her I could fly. Helen, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, but he's your son. You're my family too, Hope. The family you choose is sometimes worth more than the family you were born into. Hope's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know that when I'm gone, this house will continue to be a home filled with love. With you, it will have the affection Robert never knew how to appreciate. Hope hugged me with the tenderness of the older sister she had always been to me, and for the first time in months, I felt that someone valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. On Saturday, the phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Robert, his voice agitated. Mom, she's here. Sophia was born, my granddaughter. My first grandchild had come into the world while I slept, with no one telling me Danielle had gone into labor, with no one considering that I might want to be waiting for news instead of finding out after it was all over. Congratulations, honey. How are they? Good, good. Everything went perfectly. She weighs 7 pounds. She's beautiful. That's wonderful. Mom, she's still so tiny. The doctor says we should probably wait a few days for people to meet her, so she doesn't get sick. A few days. Always a few days. Always an excuse to keep me away from the thing I loved most in the world. Of course, honey. You let me know. Are you sure you're not upset? Why would I be upset? She's your daughter, you two decide. Robert was quiet on the other end of the line. He was probably expecting pleas, tears, promises to behave if they would just let me meet my granddaughter. Okay. Well, I'll let you get back to sleep. I'll send you pictures tomorrow on WhatsApp. Perfect. Get some rest. I hung up and stayed awake for the rest of the night. Not out of sadness, but with a strange sense of liberation. My granddaughter was born, and for the first time, I didn't feel the desperation of an excluded grandmother. I felt the serenity of a woman who had taken control of her own life. The pictures arrived the next day. Sophia was beautiful, perfect, with her eyes closed and an expression of absolute peace. She looked just like Robert when he was born. I replied with a heart emoji and the word precious. Nothing more. For the first time in my life, I didn't give more love than I was receiving, and it felt like a victory. 2 weeks after Sophia's birth, Robert showed up at my door unannounced. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was pruning the rose bushes in the yard, which had bloomed spectacularly that year, as if the peace I'd found had been transmitted to my plants. When I heard the doorbell, I didn't run like I used to. I walked slowly, wiped my hands on my apron, and opened the door with the calmness of someone who no longer expects anything. Hi, Mom. Robert looked terrible. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. His beard was overgrown, and his shirt was wrinkled and stained with what looked like baby spit-up. He was carrying Sophia in an expensive stroller I recognized as one of the baby shower gifts. Hello, honey. What a surprise. Can I come in? Danny is at her mom's, and I thought you'd like to meet your granddaughter. For a moment, my old heart skipped a beat. There she was, my granddaughter, asleep in her stroller, with rosy cheeks and the tiny hands I had imagined holding for months. But something in me had changed. The awakening that began the day I changed my will had taught me to see things with a new clarity. Does Danielle know you brought her here? Robert avoided my gaze. She's really tired. Her mom is helping her with... Robert. My voice had a firmness he didn't recognize, an authority I had found in the last few weeks when I stopped begging and started demanding respect. Does Danielle know you brought the baby here? No, he finally admitted. But Mom, I haven't slept in 2 weeks. Sophia cries all night. Danielle is exhausted, and I just needed to get out for a while. There was the truth. He hadn't come because he wanted me to meet my granddaughter. He had come because he needed a free babysitter, someone to help him with the responsibility he had taken on without truly considering what it meant to be a father. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Robert entered, pushing the stroller, and for the first time in years, my house wasn't filled with joy at his presence. It was filled with a strange feeling, like when an acquaintance who is no longer a friend, but not yet an enemy, comes to visit. He sat on the living room sofa, the same one where he had done his middle school homework, where he had brought his high school girlfriends, where he had told me he was going to marry Danielle. But now he seemed like a stranger in a place he no longer recognized as his own. "Do you want some coffee?" I asked. "Yes, please." I went to the kitchen and prepared coffee in the old percolator that had been my mother's, the one he had always criticized for being outdated compared to the espresso machines Danielle used. As the coffee brewed, I heard Sophia start to cry. "Mom, she's awake!" Robert yelled, panic in his voice. I returned to the living room. My granddaughter was crying with the desperate intensity of a newborn, and Robert was holding her as if she were a bomb about to explode. "I don't know what's wrong. She's been fed. I just changed her. Give her to me." I took Sophia in my arms and immediately felt that ancestral connection between grandmother and grandchild. She was small, perfect, with the sweet smell of a new baby and skin as soft as silk. Her eyes, when she opened them, were identical to Robert's when he was born. I cradled her against my chest, humming the lullaby I had sung to her father 30 years ago, and Sophia calmed down instantly. Her cries turned into small sighs, then into quiet breathing, and finally, she fell back asleep in my arms. "How did you do that?" Robert asked with genuine astonishment. "Experience," I replied, my eyes fixed on my granddaughter. For the next 2 hours, Robert told me the reality of his new life. Danielle had developed postpartum depression and spent most of her time crying at her mother's house. Sophia had colic and slept for no more than 2 hours at a time. He had to take time off work because he couldn't function without sleep. "I didn't know it was going to be this hard, Mom." "That's what having children is like, Robert. That's why it takes so much love and so much patience." "Did you go through this with me?" The question hurt in a different way than his previous slights. This time it hurt because it revealed the depth of his ignorance about what my life as a mother had been. "Robert, your father died when you were 3. I went through this alone, without help from anyone, working during the day to support you and staying up at night when you had nightmares or got sick." I saw something change in his expression, as if for the first time in years, he was truly seeing me, not as a piece of family furniture, but as a person who had had her own life, her own struggles, her own sacrifices. "Mom, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. You never asked." Sophia stirred in my arms and opened her eyes. She looked at me with the mysterious intensity of a baby, as if she knew things that we adults had forgotten. I smiled at her, and she made a face that could have been a smile or a grimace, but it filled me with tenderness. "She seems so calm with you," Robert observed. "Babies can sense genuine love, honey. They can feel when someone truly loves them." Robert fell silent, watching me hold his daughter with the natural ease of someone who had been doing this for decades. After a while, he spoke in a very low voice. "Mom, do you think I'm a bad father?" The question broke my heart, not because I felt sorry for him, but because it confirmed something I had suspected for weeks. Robert was lost. He had built a life based on appearances and status, but when the time came to face real responsibilities, he realized he had no solid foundation. "I think you're a scared father," I said honestly. "And I think you confused having money with knowing how to live." "What do you mean?" "Robert, for 30 years I taught you values that you decided to trade for others you thought were more modern. I taught you that family takes care of each other, respects each other, supports each other, but you learned that family is to be used, tolerated, and kept at a distance when it's inconvenient." Robert looked at me as if I were speaking another language. "Mom, that's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me how I really was? Not just out of politeness? When was the last time you came to visit because you wanted to be with me, not because you needed something?" Robert opened his mouth to answer, and then fell silent. He knew he couldn't name a single time. "Do you know what I learned at the baby shower, honey?" "What?" "I learned that your wife and her family see me as a burden. I learned that you invited me out of obligation, not affection. And I learned that you allowed all of it to happen without saying a single word in my defense. Mom, I didn't know they made you feel bad. Robert, they sat me alone, on a folding chair, away from all the tables. No one spoke to me for 3 hours. Your mother-in-law toasted 2 grandmothers and I wasn't one of them. Are you really telling me Danielle said nothing to you about this? Robert's expression shifted. Something in his eyes told me that he did know, that Danielle had told him, probably laughing about how they had managed to humiliate the unwanted mother-in-law without being directly rude. Mom, don't say anything, Robert. It's too late for explanations. Sophia started to fuss in my arms. I checked her and her diaper was wet. Did you bring diapers? Yes, they're in the bag. I changed her on my bed, in the same spot where I had changed thousands of Robert's diapers when he was a baby. Sophia let me, trusting, as if she knew these hands had done this before, with love and patience. When I returned to the living room, Robert was standing by the window, looking out at the yard where he had grown up. Mom, do you remember when we planted that red rose bush? I planted it alone, Robert. You were 12 and said that was a gardener's job. Oh, yeah, you're right. That rose bush is 30 years old. This year, it produced the most beautiful flowers I've ever seen. Do you know why? Why? Because I planted it with love and I have cared for it with patience for 3 decades. I didn't abandon it when it didn't bloom. I didn't neglect it when other roses seemed prettier. I loved it constantly, unconditionally. Robert understood the metaphor. He came and sat next to me on the sofa. Mom, I know I've been a bad son. You haven't been bad, Robert. You've been indifferent. And sometimes indifference hurts more than malice. How can I fix this? The question I had waited years to hear had finally come, now that it was too late. Not because forgiveness was impossible, but because I had discovered I no longer needed it to be happy. It's not about fixing it, honey. It's about deciding what kind of person you want to be from now on. Robert looked at me with watery eyes. I want to be better. I want Sophia to have a grandmother who loves her. Sophia will always have my love, Robert. But she will have it on my terms, not Danielle's. What do you mean? I mean that if you want me to be a part of my granddaughter's life, you are going to have to learn to respect me. You are going to have to set boundaries with your wife when she disrespects me. And you are going to have to decide if you are a man who defends his mother or a boy who hides behind his wife. Robert was silent for a long time, carrying the weight of words he had never heard from my mouth. Will you give me another chance? I will give you the chance that you prove you deserve, Robert. No more, no less. That evening, after they left, my house was filled with silence again, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the emptiness of loneliness, but the fullness of someone who has reclaimed her dignity. Hope peeked over the fence. How was it with your granddaughter, dear? Beautiful, Hope. Perfect. And Robert? Robert is learning that being a grown-up is hard work. That night, before I went to sleep, I looked at the picture Robert had taken of me holding Sophia. In my eyes, I could see something I had lost for years and had just found again, the certainty that I deserved love, respect, and consideration. I was no longer the woman who begged for scraps of affection. I was the grandmother my granddaughter needed, strong, dignified, and willing to love without allowing that love to be abused. The change had begun. 6 months after that life-altering conversation, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. It was an April morning, and I was on the terrace of a lodge in Lake Arrowhead, eating breakfast overlooking the water as the spring sun warmed my face and the aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the crisp mountain air. I wasn't alone. With me were 5 women my age who had been through situations similar to mine. Carmen, whose daughter had left her in a nursing home after taking her house. Luce, who had raised 3 grandchildren while her son battled addiction, only to be kicked out when he recovered. Amparo, who had worked her whole life to support a family that treated her like a maid. Rosa, who had given her life savings for her children's education and was then ignored when they became successful. And Hope, my dear friend, who had become my chosen sister. We were the Renaissance women, as we had named ourselves after meeting in a free support group led by Dr. Patricia Sanchez at the local community center. 6 women who had learned that it's never too late to start over, that dignity has no age, And that self-love is the foundation for every other kind of love. Helen, Rosa said as she spread strawberry jam on her toast, tell us what happened with Robert yesterday. Yesterday, Robert had come to my house, just as he did every Tuesday and Friday for the past 4 months. He no longer showed up unannounced, no longer came bearing problems for me to solve, no longer used Sophia as an excuse to get free help. Now he came because he had learned, slowly and painfully, that he wanted to rebuild a genuine relationship with his mother. He arrived at 5 on the dot, I said, as the women listened intently. He brought Sophia, but before he came in, he asked me if it was a good time, if I had other plans, if we could just talk for a while. What a difference, exclaimed Carmen. Do you remember how he used to just show up? Of course I remembered. It had taken Robert 4 months of family counseling to understand that treating people with respect wasn't optional, it was fundamental. 4 months to learn that his mother was not a 24/7 resource, but a person with her own life, her own plans, her own needs. And Danielle, how is she behaving now? Luce asked. That was the trickiest part. Danielle had taken longer to change, but circumstances had forced her hand. It turned out that when Robert started setting boundaries at home, when he started saying, "My mother deserves respect," and if you can't treat her well, then we won't involve her in our lives, Danielle found herself completely alone with a baby who wouldn't let her sleep and a postpartum depression her wealthy mother couldn't fix with money. She apologized to me last week, I told my friends, who listened with the satisfaction of those who had lived through similar situations. Really? Amparo nearly choked on her coffee. Really? She said she had been very immature, that she didn't understand how important it is to have family support, and that she hoped we could start over. And what did you say? I told her I appreciated her apology, but that relationships are built on actions, not words. That if she truly wanted us to be family, she would have to prove it day by day, not just when she needed something from me. All 5 women nodded in approval. We had all learned the same lesson. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to patterns of abuse. It means establishing new rules based on mutual respect. And how is your relationship with Sophia? Asked Hope, who knew every detail of my story because she had witnessed my transformation firsthand. My granddaughter, my beautiful 7-month-old Sophia, who now knew me, smiled when I arrived and held out her little arms for me to hold her. The child that Robert and Danielle brought to me twice a week, not because they needed a babysitter, but because they had understood that a loving grandmother is a treasure, not a burden. She said Gamma yesterday, I told them with genuine pride. It wasn't clear, but Robert says it was for me. How wonderful! Rosa clapped like a little girl. And the best part is that now, when I'm with her, I don't feel that desperation I used to. I don't feel like I have to take advantage of every second because I don't know when they'll take her away again. I know I'll see her soon. I know I'll be a part of her life. I know my love for her has room to grow. We finished breakfast and walked through the lodge gardens. This trip to Lake Arrowhead was our gift to ourselves for 6 months of successful group therapy. Dr. Sanchez had helped us organize this vacation to celebrate our personal growth, and each of us had contributed what we could to make these 4 days of well-deserved rest a reality. I had been able to contribute more than the others because my finances had improved considerably, not only because I no longer spent my money trying to buy Robert's love with gifts and financial help he never valued, but because I had made smart decisions with my assets. My house in Pasadena, the one I had planned to leave to Robert, was now rented out in the mornings as a photography studio for weddings. A young couple of photographers had seen the potential of the craftsman architecture, the wooden beams, the natural light flooding through the large windows, and they paid me very well to use my home as a backdrop 3 times a week. With that extra money, I had been able to fix things that had been broken for years. I'd updated my wardrobe, started taking watercolor classes at the local art center, and treated myself to a trip with my friends. Helen, Carmen said as we walked by the lake, do you ever regret changing your will? Never, I answered without hesitation. It was the best decision I've made in years. And it was true. The will remained unchanged. My house and my savings would go to Hope, who had been more of a family to me than my own son when I needed it most. Robert didn't know about this change, and I had decided he would find out when it was too late to feign love for personal gain. But now that Robert has changed, Carmen pressed. Carmen, Robert changed because he faced consequences for his behavior. He changed because he realized he was going to lose something valuable. That's wonderful. And I'm happy to have a better relationship with him. But my will isn't a prize for good behavior. It's my decision about my estate, and it has been made. And if he asks you directly, I'll tell him the truth, that a mother has no obligation to leave an inheritance to a son who treated her poorly for years. That love isn't inherited, it's earned. And that Hope earned that house by caring for me when he didn't. That afternoon, as we had tea on the terrace watching the sunset over the lake, I reflected on everything that had changed in my life since that humiliating baby shower had awakened me from years of compliance. I was no longer the woman who cooked brisket for people who had already eaten. I was no longer the grandmother who begged for pictures of her grandchild. I was no longer the mother who apologized for existing in her adult son's life. I was Helen Miller, 63 years old, owner of my home, my decisions, my dignity. I was a woman who had genuine friends, hobbies that filled me with satisfaction, and a family relationship based on mutual respect, not desperation for love. My phone rang. It was Robert. Hi, Mom. How are you? Are you enjoying your trip? Very well, honey. We're having a beautiful time. That's great. Hey, Mom. Sophia has been asking for you. Well, not with words, but she gets excited when she hears your name. I smiled. This version of Robert, who called to tell me nice things about my granddaughter without needing anything in return, was someone worth having in my life. Give her a little kiss from me. I'll see her on Thursday. Perfect, Mom. Thank you. For what, honey? For giving us another chance. For teaching me how to be a better son. For not giving up on me. Robert, I never gave up on you. I just stopped letting you treat me badly. I know. And it was the best thing you could have done for me. After I hung up, I gazed at the lake as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. My friends were chatting at the next table, laughing at one of Luce's stories about her grandchildren, and I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in decades. This was my new life, a life where love existed, but it had boundaries, where family was important, but not at the expense of my dignity, where being a grandmother was a blessing, but not an obligation that justified any mistreatment. The next day, our last in Lake Arrowhead, we had breakfast on the terrace again. The waiter, a man my age who had been very attentive during our stay, came over to say goodbye. Ladies, it was a pleasure serving you. I can tell you are all very good friends. The best family is the one you choose, I replied, and my 5 travel companions nodded with knowing smiles. On the bus ride back to Los Angeles, as we watched the landscape pass by the window, Rosa asked me, Helen, if you could say something to a woman who is going through what you went through, what would you tell her? I thought for several minutes before answering. I would tell her that it's never too late to learn to value yourself, that true love doesn't humiliate, exclude, or mistreat, that being a mother or a grandmother doesn't mean you have to accept any kind of treatment, and that sometimes the best way to love someone is to set boundaries that force them to treat you as you deserve. Anything else? Yes. I would tell her that loneliness is cured with self-love, not by begging for affection from others, and that when you learn to be happy on your own, other people start to value your company. When I arrived at my home in Pasadena that night, I found a bouquet of flowers on the doorstep with a card from Robert and Danielle. Thank you for being the grandmother Sophia needs. We love you. I put the flowers in the crystal vase that had been my mother's, made myself a chamomile tea, and sat on the porch to enjoy my home. My home, which smelled of geraniums, which had walls full of beautiful memories, which was mine by my own right, not through inheritance or charity. The rosebush I had planted 30 years ago was blooming again. The red roses looked perfect under the moonlight, reminding me that the things you care for with constant love always bear the most beautiful fruit. Like me, like my new life, like the woman who had learned to blossom after so many years of emotional drought. And if you, listening to me, have lived through something similar, or you know someone who is going through this, I want you to know that it's never too late to start again. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your family to be respected? Tell me in the comments if this story reminded you of someone you know. And if this message touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this story can reach someone else who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the stories of other women are the mirror where we can see ourselves and find the courage to change our own lives. Never forget, you deserve love, respect, and happiness. And it's never too late to demand them.